They mocked her for being too poor until the rich baron said, "My ranch needs a woman like you." Dust Hollow Spring Festival, 1889. The central plaza of Dust Hollow hummed with cheerful chuckles and lively melodies as colorful streamers danced from tall posts and violin strains bounced off the weathered timber facades. It marked the yearly celebration of renewal, and nearly every resident appeared radiant with joy, all except Clara May. She lingered on the outskirts of the gathering, gripping a carefully crafted cluster of field blossoms tied together with a remnant of fabric. Her gown, a worn-out ash tone mended in countless spots, draped over her slight build like a faded recollection. Grime dusted her footwear, split along the edges, and still her spine remained unbent. Her jaw elevated with a serene, unbreakable poise. Folks muttered under their breath. "That's the lass from the tavern, right? Scrapes by on leftovers. Always carries the scent of salve and garlic. But look at those blooms of hers. Genuine wild ones." To the astonishment of all, Clara's arrangement had taken the prize in the festival's floral competition, the sole activity she ventured to enter. An aide to the mayor summoned her from the rustic platform. "Clara May, step up to receive your award." She paused, astonished, before advancing amid the assembly. Her face grew warm. She wasn't accustomed to notice, let alone praise. Every stride seemed like navigating a bed of spines. Alice Whitmore, the impeccably attired offspring of the settlement's richest rancher, observed from the sidelines, her rouged mouth twisted into a smirk. As Clara drew near, Alice moved into her way and stumbled. A brimming pail of dingy rinse liquid, seemingly knocked over from an adjacent booth, doused Clara's attire. The floral bundle tumbled, trampled beneath filthy soles. The plaza hushed for a moment, then burst into vicious guffaws. "She's acting like she's some kind of bride. Blossoms won't mask the reek of destitution. Or maybe she forgot her own rags." Clara refused to flee. She held back tears. She knelt, meticulously collected the drooping flowers, and rose with composed elegance. Even as filthy droplets cascaded from her hem, without uttering a sound, she descended the platform and pivoted to depart. Then a voice sliced across the plaza like a lash's snap. "Wait there!" The mirth ceased abruptly. From the distant side of the plaza, a towering figure strode ahead. Elias Thorne, the withdrawn baron of Thorne Ranch, clad in a dark overcoat, his wide frame throwing elongated silhouettes in the fading light. A fellow renowned for reticence and isolation, not communal displays. He approached Clara's side. Silently, he unbuttoned his garment and draped it tenderly over her drenched form. Then he addressed the onlookers. "My ranch," he stated firmly, "needs a woman like her." Gasps rippled through the square. Alice went pale. Some gawked. Others murmured behind their hands. "Is he serious?" "That's Elias Thorne. He never talks to anyone." "He's defending her." Clara looked up at him, eyes wide. He leaned slightly, his voice soft, so only she could hear. "You gave your last coins to a woman who couldn't even see your face. You think I wouldn't notice a heart like that?" Her breath caught. She hadn't known anyone saw. Flashback a few days earlier. Rain poured over the muddy alley behind the apothecary. Clara, holding a small oilcloth, knelt beside an old blind woman trying to find her way home. Clara had guided her gently without speaking her name. And once the door closed, she had quietly placed 3 coins on the porch step before vanishing back into the storm. From a carriage across the street, partially hidden by fogged glass, Elias Thorne had watched. He hadn't meant to be there, but something about the girl in the rain helping with hands that shook from hunger had caught him, held him. The coins left behind without witness. They stirred something long dormant in his chest. Present moment. Now Clara looked into Elias's eyes, not with fear, but with a flicker of fragile hope. For the first time, someone had seen past her rags and calloused hands, not with pity, but with purpose. The crowd stayed silent, unsure, almost reverent, and Clara, bouquet in hand, coat on shoulders, walked away, not alone this time. Later that evening, Clara sat beside her younger brother Henry in the narrow room above the saloon. The walls were thin, the air smelled of whiskey and sweat, and her patched dress still clung damp to her skin. She pressed a cool cloth to Henry's forehead, her eyes distant. mine still echoing with the voice from earlier. My ranch needs a woman like you. She shook it off. Rich men always had reasons. Reasons rarely meant rescue and never without a price. A soft knock echoed through the narrow hallway. Clara opened the door to find him, Elias Thorne, standing under the yellow lamplight, a paper envelope in hand. I came to make an offer, he said plainly. I don't want your charity, she replied before he could say more. It's not charity, he said. It's a job. He stepped inside, holding the envelope out to her. Inside was a contract. Herbal manager, he said. My ranch has a medicinal garden. You'd run it. The pay is fair. House comes with it. And the ranch doctor would treat your brother. Clara narrowed her eyes. Why me? I need someone who works hard, who understands scare. The men won't say it, but they trust the woman who saved one of theirs from a rattler bite last year. That was you. She stiffened. I watched you today. You didn't cry, didn't curse. You stood straight in filth. That's strength, and I need strength. She crossed her arms. So I get a roof, a wage, and medicine in exchange for my dignity. I'm not buying you, Miss May. I'm offering you a place to stand. She studied him. Why would a man like you need someone like me? His voice dropped. Maybe I'm tired of the wrong people around me. A silence settled behind her. Henry coughed. Deep, painful wet. She glanced over her shoulder, then looked back at Elias. I'll think about it. Elias nodded. You have until tomorrow. Then he turned and walked down the creaking stairs, his boots echoing like thunder. That night. Clara sat beside Henry, her fingers tangled in the blanket. He'd been quiet all day, but now he was burning. Clara, he whispered, it hurts. She held him close. I know. I'm here. Then came the rattle. Wet, heavy, violent. Blood sprayed across the pillow as Henry hacked through another cough. Clara's heart seized. She stared at the red stain. And suddenly, Elias Thorne's offer didn't seem like a rescue. It felt like the only way to survive. The next morning, the sun had barely lifted over the rolling hills when Clara arrived at the gates of Thorne Ranch. One hand gripped the frayed handle of a threadbare satchel. The other supported her younger brother, Henry, whose feverish head rested heavily against her shoulder. Dust rose as she stepped onto the main path. Two ranch hands paused their work, their eyes lingering too long, their whispers curling through the morning air like smoke. She kept her gaze forward. Elias Thorne was waiting. He didn't offer a smile nor a welcome. He simply stepped forward and without a word lifted Henry from her arms. His movements were careful, as though the boy were fragile glass. This way, he said. He led her across the yard to a modest cabin tucked behind the main stables. Weathered wood, a tin roof, the smell of lavender growing wild around its frame. Inside, a doctor was already tending to Henry. Clara Ara stood at the door's edge, hesitant, her knuckles white where they gripped the satchel. You're free to leave whenever you like, Ilya said without turning. But if you stay, you'll work. And in time, the ranch will speak for you louder than any of them ever could. I don't need rescuing, she replied. I'm not offering rescue, he said. I'm offering purpose. The first days were quiet but not easy. Clara threw herself into tending the herb garden. Rows of sage and comfrey, yarrow and mint, her fingers red from pruning, her back sore from digging. Themen on the ranch eyed her wearily, as if waiting for her to fail. They offered no help, no kind words, only silence and suspicion. But Elias never interfered. He watched from a distance, always watching. He didn't smile. He didn't praise. But when a storm rolled in and her roof began to leak, she awoke the next morning to find new shingles laid neatly beside her cabin. When her firewood dwindled, a fresh pile appeared outside the door. No notes, no explanations, just actions. At night, she read to Henry by firelight. He was already stronger, color returning to his cheeks. One evening, as she recited from a worn book, a second voice joined hers. May I read the next page? A small boy stepped into the flickering light. He couldn't have been older than 7. Dark curls fell over his brow, and his eyes, sharp storm gray, mirrored the man who owned the ranch. And you are? Clara asked gently. Tommy, he said with a grin. I like books. Before she could speak again, Elias appeared at the door. He's my nephew, he said flatly. But Clara noticed the way the boy glanced at him. Not like a nephew. like a son who knew how far away a father could be, even when he stood in the same room. The man began to whisper less as the days passed. She brewed teas for aches, balms for burns, tinctures for broken sleep. And though they never thanked her outright, she saw the change in the way they nodded as they passed, the way they paused longer when she spoke. Still, they didn't trust her. Not yet. It was nearing midday when the first real test came. Clara had just returned from harvesting lavender when a scream shattered the stillness of the ranch. A young ranch hand, Marcus, had been bitten by a rattlesnake near the hay barn. His leg was already swelling, the color draining from his face. Thiemen gathered in panic, voices clashing, frozen by fear. Clara pushed through them, dropping to her knees. "Bring me hot water, charcoal, and comfrey now," her voice cut through the chaos. They hesitated. She met their eyes, fierce and calm, and this time they moved. She crushed herbs with the heel of her boot, mixed a paste with trembling hands, and packed the wound. All the while, Elias stood a few feet away, arms crossed, unmoving, his face unreadable. But he didn't look away. That night, Marcus breathed steady in the bunkhouse. Clara stepped out into the cool air, her apron stained with medicine and dust. Elias stood near the edge of her garden, one boot resting on the fence rail. "You saved him," he said. "I did what I could," she replied. "Same thing?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Why do you help in silence but disappear when someone looks?" He didn't answer, just watched her, then turned slowly toward the night, his shadow long across the path. As she reached for her door, something shifted, not in the wind, but in the air between them. And for the first time since she arrived, Elias Thorne let the corner of his mouth curve upward, just slightly, a smile, but real. Early summer nights, Clara's hands had grown calloused, but her touch remained gentle with herbs, with horses, and with her younger brother Henry, who still lay pale but breathing easier by the day. The ranch was vast and rough-edged, run entirely by men who looked at her with suspicion at first, but Clara never flinched. She worked from dawn to well past dusk, hauling water, mending fences, and preparing herbal salves that eased the pain in many an aching knee or sun-shed neck. Elias Thorne never praised her. He rarely spoke at all. Yet his presence lingered in quiet gestures. A basket of fresh rolls left on her steps in the morning, a folded blanket placed by the garden bench, or vestibule roof mysteriously prepared just before the storm rolled in. Clara noticed. She always did. One night, Thesky cracked open with rain and wind. Clara, lantern in hand, ran out to check on the mares, worried one of them might be foeing. As she reached the paddock gate, a shadow stepped beside her, Elias, wordless. He lifted a broad, weathered hand and held a canvas coat over them both. Their fingers brushed as he adjusted the coat over her shoulders. The touch wasn't electric. It was something slower, like embers stirring after years of quiet. Clara looked at him through the downpour. "Why are you kind no one's watching and distant when I'm looking?" He didn't answer. He simply held the coat tighter around them for one moment longer, then turned and walked away into the rain. The next morning brought a different kind of storm. The ranch hands had gathered for breakfast beneath the awning by the cookhouse. Clara arrived late, hands still stained with salve and wild mint, only to find a commotion forming. Joshua, the youngest of the hired men, stood in the center of the group. His face was flushed, hair neatly combed, and in his hands he held a bouquet of fresh-picked wild flowers, yellow airs, white daisies, a single pink rose tucked in the center. He turned toward Clara as she approached, voice shaking slightly but clear. "Clara Ara, I may not own a ranch, but I have a heart that beats for you. Will you marry me?" Gasps fluttered through the crowd. A few mouths dropped open. Coffee mugs paused mid-air. Even the horses in the distance seemed to go silent. Clara froze. Her breath caught, and instinctively her eyes searched for Elias. He stood just beyond the fence line, leaning against a post, arms crossed, unreadable. But she saw it. A flicker of something raw, something pained. Before he turned his gaze away, Joshua was still kneeling. Clara stepped forward slowly. She took the flowers, fingers brushing his. "Joshua, you are kind, but I need time." Her voice was soft but firm. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. The crowd murmured, then dispersed. Some shrugged, others whispered. Joshua stood, eyes downcast, and walked away with quiet dignity. Clara turned toward the barn, clutching the bouquet to her chest, her thoughts louder than any voice around her. She didn't know what the right choice was, but she knew her heart wasn't something to give away out of gratitude, nor loneliness. It had begun to beat in a direction she hadn't expected toward a man who offered no smiles, only shelter in the storm, and that scared her more than anything. The wind carried the scent of drying hay and sagebrush across Thorn Ranch, but that morning brought a different presence altogether. A man, not a memory. Clara had just finished tending to the herb beds when she saw a rider approaching from the east trail. He dismounted slowly, his movement stiff with age, dust clinging to his boots and hat. "Is Elias Thornton around?" he asked. Clara nodded toward the main barn. "He's likely in the tack room." The man tipped his hat. "Thank you, miss." Clara should have returned to her chores, but something about the man, the way he glanced toward the house with a sigh, made her linger. Moments later, as she passed the barn with a pail of fresh water, she overheard their voices. The barn door had been left ajar. "She's got your late wife's fire, you know," the older man said. "They're wassailants." Then Elias answered, voice low and rough. "Don't you ever going to tell someone? That boy thinks she's his cousin. The whole town believes you just took him in like a stray dog." "I kept him safe," I snapped. "That's all that matters. And yourself? Are you safe, Elias?" Clara didn't hear more. She moved away, heart pounding, her thoughts swirled with confusion, pieces falling into place. The boy, Tommy, wasn't Elias's nephew. He was his son. And Elias had once had a wife. Later that evening, the older man found Clara Ara by the corral fence where she was brushing one of the horses. "You're Clara, right?" She nodded, cautious. "I'm Amos. Served with Elias during the war, then worked land with him after. He ever tell you about Isbel?" Clara shook her head. He was his wife. Strong, mixed blood, part Cherokee, part Irish, beautiful and bold, the kind of woman who'd plant a garden on rock if she had to. Amos looked off into the distance. "But the land around here ain't kind to people like her." There was a dispute. A group of men wanted Elias's grazing rights. When he refused, they struck where it had hurt most. Clara's breath hitched. "They shot her. Clara, right on that porch." Elias tried to fight back. Nearly died doing it, but he couldn't save her, and he's been carrying that ever since. That's why he lies about the boy, to keep the questions away, to keep the pain locked up. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by candlelight in the small room behind the kitchen, pen in hand, diary open before her. Thank trembled slightly as she wrote, "I see the walls he built not to keep others out, but to keep his pain in." She paused, thinking of the way Elias touched the horses, how he'd silently fixed her roof, how his eyes always lingered just a moment too long when she wasn't looking. "I don't want to be rescued. I want to be seen as a woman worthy of love, not pity." The next morning, she carried medicine to the livestock pen where a calf had been limping. She placed her journal in the barn's small storage nook for safekeeping, not realizing the wind had knocked it open slightly. Later, Elias entered the barn, hunting for a wrench. As he bent to check the shelf, his fingers brushed the edge of the leather-bound book. The spine creaked open, revealing a page half filled with Clara's tight, slanted handwriting. He read it, not all, just a few lines, but enough. Enough to stop his breath. Enough to loosen something in his chest he thought had died with Isabel. He closed the book gently, as if it were fragile, sacred. His hand lingered on the cover before pulling it to his chest. "She doesn't want saving," he whispered to the silence. "She wants someone who chooses her." He stood there a long time, sunlight slipping through the slats above, painting stripes of gold across his face. A man finally realizing that the strongest person on the ranch wasn't the one who could break a wild stallion or fix a fence in the snow. It was the woman who carried grief and kindness in the same breath and never asked for anything in return. And he had nearly lost her without ever letting her know she mattered. By the third week of summer, the once warm atmosphere at Thorn Ranch began to shift. Whispers drifted like smoke between fence posts and over dinner plates. Since Joshua's public proposal, Clara had drawn more than just admiration. Envy brewed in the hearts of a few ranch hands who were never fond of her quiet rise. "She came from dirt and now walks like she owns the place," one muttered. "She's playing him like every other woman who spots a lonely man with money." Another added, his voice sharp as a burr under a saddle. Clara noticed the sidelong glances, the quiet when she entered a room. Even the older men who once asked her for salves and tea had grown distant. It came to a head one stormy night. The ranch's petty cash wages meant for the stable boys vanished from the lockbox in the main house. Panic spread quickly. Suspicion came quicker. "She's the only one not from here," someone said. "Worked at a saloon, did she not? Saw her slip bread once to her sick brother," another offered. Before long, a group of ranch hands barged into the room Clara shared with her brother. They tore through her modest belongings, overturned her basket of herbs, until one of them pulled out Addesty's satchel and held up a leather pouch. "The missing money," he said. Clara stood frozen. "That is not mine." But the murmurs turned into murmured agreement, then rising accusations. One man shouted, "You think because the Baron likes you, you can take what you want." She turned to Elias, who had just stepped in, drawn by the noise. His face was unreadable. "I did not take it," she said, voice trembling, but firm. "You know I didn't." Elis looked around at the faces of men he'd known for years, at Clara's shaking hands, at Henry clutching her skirt in fear. He said nothing. That silence hurt more than words ever could. Clara stepped back, tears burning her eyes. "If you won't believe in me, then I shouldn't stay." She packed quietly that night. No tears, no pleas. Just Henry's small arms wrapped around her waist as she folded the few things they owned. By dawn, the rain had stopped, and the trail leading away from the ranch was wet with their footprints. Elias watched from the front porch, fists clenched so tight his knuckles bled white. But he did not call her back. Joshua, standing nearby, said nothing either, but his smile, once confident, had vanished. That evening the ranch felt eerily quiet. The kitchen felt colder, the garden less alive. Elias stayed in the barn longer than usual, trying to wrestle peace out of the ache twisting inside him. It was Tommy, Elias's son, who stumbled on the truth the next day. While chasing a stray cat near the hay barn, he knocked over a loose bale. Behind it, wrapped anode canvas, was the real missing pouch, complete with the nameplate still attached. "Stable fund." He ran with it in his arms to Elias Paver's palm. Oh, look. This was hidden in the hay, not in Clara's things. Elias took the pouch, turned it over, and recognized the handwriting scrolled on the note attached. A former employee trusted for years, known for his disdain for Clara. A setup, a lie. He staggered back, the barn wall catching his shoulder. His breath left him as if he had been punched. She had told the truth. She had asked for belief, and he had failed her. The horizon stretched wide and empty like the space in his chest. Clara was gone, and this time she might not come back. The morning sun climbed slow over Dust Hollow, casting gold across the busy market square. It was a Saturday, Chophian, and the town bustled with laughter, haggling the clatter of horseshoes against cobblestones. No one noticed at first when Elias Thorne rode in on his chestnut stallion, wearing no hat, no gun, just a leather satchel and a storm in his eyes. He dismounted without a word, handed the reins to a boy nearby, and strode straight to the old wooden platform used for auctions and speeches. The murmurs began. "That's Elias Thorne. What is he doing here, dressed like that? Is he drunk?" He stepped onto the platform and turned to face them all. Farmers, wives, ranchers, blacksmiths, even Alice and her father stood in the crowd watching. "I know what you all think," Elias began, voice low but unwavering. "I am not a man who talks much. I work, I build, I bury pain where no one can see it. And in doing that, I failed her." A rustle moved through the crowd. "I failed Claire. I failed all of you. I did not speak when it mattered, but I'm speaking now." He reached into the satchel and pulled out Clara's weathered, leather-bound journal. She left this behind. Her thoughts, her fears, her hope that someone might one day see her. He opened the journal and read, his voice catching. "I don't want to be rescued. He want to be seen as a woman worthy of love, not pity." Silence fell like snow. Elias closed the journal. He looked up, eyes raw. "This woman taught my son to laugh again, taught my horses to trust again, and taught me that silence is worse than lies." The crowd was still. Even the chickens under the feed stall seemed to hush. From across the street, Clara paused, arms full of herbs and fabric, Henry trailing behind her. She'd only meant to sell a few things, maybe barter for some bread, but the commotion drew her in. She heard her name. She heard him. She froze. A path parted through the people, slow and reverent. Clara stepped forward, trembling. Elias saw her, and the breath left his chest. He stepped off the platform and crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. "You are not just good enough," he said, voice thick, breaking. "You're everything, and I let you walk away thinking you were alone." She opened her mouth, but no sound came. "I know I cannot erase what I did not say, but if you can still believe in me—" He reached for her hand. "Come home. Not for the ranch, not for Henry, for me." Henry tugged at her skirt and whispered, "Mama, please. I miss you so much." Tears filled her eyes, spilling fast and warm. She knelt, pulled Henry into her arms, and buried her face in his shoulder. Then she stood and looked at Elias. "I never wanted saving," she said softly, her voice shaking. "But you're the first man who ever asked me to stay for me." A beat. Then she took his hand. The crowd erupted in applause. Some clapped slow, others cried freely. Even Alice looked away, ashamed. Tommy ran from the side of the market, beaming. "You're really coming back for real?" he shouted. Clara laughed through her tears. "For real?" Elias leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. This time he did not whisper. This time, all of Dust Hollow heard his vow. "No more silence. You are mine to walk beside, not behind. And I will never let you feel small again." And from that moment on, no one in town dared question why the Baron of Thorn Ranch had chosen the girl in the patch dress, because now they all saw her too. The sun hung low over the horizon, painting the wildflower fields of Dust Hollow in hues of amber and rose. A gentle breeze carried the scent of lavender and sage, rustling the handmade bunting that fluttered between wooden stakes tied with jute twine. Rows of rough-hewn benches lined the clearing, every seat filled with townsfolk dressed in their best. Even Alice sat near the back, head bowed. At the front stood a modest arch wrapped in vines and paper daisies, built by the ranch hands themselves. There was no orchestra, only the sound of birdsong, laughter, and the occasional neigh from the horses grazing nearby. Clara May stood behind the arch, her hands trembling slightly as she held a bouquet of fresh wild flowers. Her dress was simple, hand-stitched from cream linen and lace, a gift from Elias's mother, who had sewn every thread with kindness and hope. The veil, barely a wisp of gauze, danced in the wind behind her. She looked up as Tommy walked down the aisle, his straw hat crooked, a velvet pouch tied to its brim holding the rings. He beamed with pride, stepping carefully so as not to drop anything. The crowd melted into soft smiles. Joshua sat in the front row, a sprig of rosemary pinned to his shirt, his hands clasped between his knees. When Clara met his gaze, he smiled and nodded. No bitterness, only quiet blessing. Then Elias appeared, tall, calm, wearing a clean vest and his father's old bolo tie. He walked to the arch and extended his hand. Clara stepped forward, placing hers in his. "You ready, Miss May?" the minister asked, smiling gently. Clara glanced at the crowd. Then at Elias. "I have never been more." As the ceremony began, Elias leaned close, his voice low enough only for her to hear. "This time no one dares laugh at you. This time they all stand for you." She blinked back tears, her heart full. The minister spoke the vows steady and warm as the golden light filtered through the tall grass. When he reached the final words, a hush fell. "Speak now or forever hold your peace." For a moment there was silence. Then Tommy's voice rang out, loud, pure, and mischievous. Dad said, "The ranch needed a woman like Mom, but I think I need her more." Laughter burst from the crowd, some wiping their eyes, others clutching their chests. Clara covered her mouth, smiling through tears. Ella knelt slightly, scooped Tommy up into one arm, then turned and kissed Clara, soft, certain, sealing every word, every wound. The applause was thunderous. Petals flew through the air. Someone played a fiddle. Children ran between the rows, and the horses beyond the fence whinnied in approval. And under the sky that watched them suffer, break, heal, and choose each other, Clara and Elias began again together. "Thank you for riding through this heartfelt journey with us," and they mocked her for being too poor. Until the rich baron said, "My ranch needs a woman like you." If Clara's courage, Elias's quiet strength, and the power of love rising from ashes moved you. Smash that hype button and help us share this story with more hearts out there. And if you crave more slow-burn romances, untamed emotions, and redemptive endings in the Wild West, subscribe to the Legends of the Wild West Stories channel today. More love, more tears, more hope, all waiting for you right here. Until next time, partner.